Hey everyone, this is Alisha Costanzo and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my restrictive reading wrap up for February. I read 7 books in February. Not too bad considering. Not too bad. Especially since I had assumed originally that I would read way more audiobooks than I did physical or ebooks, and I didn't. I actually read 4 out of 7, and 3 of them were audiobooks. Granted, quite long audiobooks, but still. Okay, let's get into some of these stats. So first, the number of pages that I read was 2,419. Not too bad. How is that compared to last month? A little bit more than last month, and that is surprising, but glad I got there. I also read for 29 hours and 9 minutes and 3 seconds, or one day, 5 hours, 9 minutes and 3 seconds. Of the 7 books I read, 3 of them were YA and 4 of them were adult. 3 of them were fantasy, 2 of them were sci-fi, 1 was a thriller, and 1 was a romance. Far different than what I read last month. I didn't read any fantasy last month, and I read 3 fantasy this month, so I'm feeling pretty good about being back toward my comfort zone, although March is going to be a little different. So, yep. Let's start with the first book that I read this month that was not on my TBR. I finally read Artemis Fowl. Yes. Ooh. I have Artemis Fowl. Hold on. So I finally read Artemis Fowl. Ooh, glare. If you know, or you've been with me for a couple months, last year I had this on my TBR for 5 months, I swear. It was ridiculous. And this is actually one of the books that I listened to on audiobook because I figured it would get done. And my hold was up, so I read it before I got to my actual TBR. Hi. I have a pumpkin. This is about a antagonist, really, as our protagonist. He is a boy villain who's trying to trick the fairies out of their gold, and he seems to be able to do that, but it's okay. So let's talk about my word for this is lore, by the way, because the lore in this was fantastic. They had rules, they had a system, they had very specific characterizations of the different creatures and acronyms and reasons why they were called the things they were called, and yada yada yada. All of the world building shit that I like that is lore based. I really liked a lot of the characters in general. What I didn't like was the head hopping, the omniscient point of view. I'm not a fan of omniscient point of view. I am not a fan of hopping between just a select few number of characters either. One point of view per scene. That is a rule that I live by. There's occasionally a story out there that can head hop and do it well, that can use omniscience and do it well, but the majority of the time I do not like it. I just don't like it. I don't find a good reason for it most of the time and find it unnecessary, so that hindered my like for this book. I did, however, give it a 3.5 because of all the other stuff in it that was really interesting. It was young adult, quite young adult, so it was a little immature, and I'm okay with that because that's what it's supposed to be, so you know. But yes, lore was fantastic. Highly recommend for young readers if you don't have the issue with head hopping omniscience. So, book 1. Book number 2 is Naked in Death by J.D. Robb, and this was my thriller. Well, you could call it a sci-fi too because it is futuristic thriller. So, my word. Hey, you. Got my new Starbucks cup that I got from work for free. It's mermaid. I don't know if you can see it. Mermaid pattern. But I drink a lot of water because of that thing. Alright, anyways, my word for Naked in Death is unbelievable. Major parts of the storyline were unbelievable. A lot of the writing style made no sense, trying to use words in different ways that they're not supposed to be used in, and I didn't enjoy that. I was like, some of the writing was brilliant. It was the other parts where I'm like, that's the only way I would literally sigh out loud and read the sentence to my husband and go, what the fuck does that mean? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. It needed a better editor. The head hopping in this too. The simplicity of the relationship between Rourke and Eve. It was bad. I gave it a 2.5. I don't normally score books that low. I probably would have DNF'd it a long time like I finished the book because it was one of the ones my dad recommended me, and I loved Bosch so much from his recommendation, and I think Bosch actually ruined Eve Dallas books for me. I really liked a lot of the snarky shit that happened, but the relationship wasn't built properly. I did not feel a lot of what they were feeling and they're rushing into it. The double whammy of her father's abuse with the father and grandfather abuse that was in her case was just a little bit head on, a little nail on the head kind of combination for book one. So yeah, I don't feel like she made women look all that great either with her choices. So yeah, I've seen better female cops. I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't want to blather on about a terrible book. I would have DNF'd it. I didn't. I gave it a 2.5. Book number 3 is We Hunt the Flames by Hafsa Fazul. I looked up how you say that name, and it's pretty sure by the pronunciation thing is how you say it. So this one was one of my YA fantasy books. It was more in the epic fantasy type of world with the terrible king and the magic and the assassin and the female who's trying to be, save her people as the hunters. Is very much gender role issues and darkness issues and violence and love, and you know what? I really, really liked this book. The word for this was tension, by the way. Tension throughout it. Very, very short chapters, some of which I bet were only a page long. I listened to it. And there's 2 narrators, a male and a female. I loved it. And I can't wait for book 2. Excellent place to leave the cliffhanger. Yes. This was part of my Instagram challenge, and I did record a little bit more of me responding to it, me reading throughout. So I'll leave more comments at the end, but it did the things I wanted it to, and I'm ready for book 2. So yeah, I gave this 5 stars. Next, I read Self-Made by Matt Groom is the author, and then there's artists and whatnot that really should be mentioned, so let me find their names. So here's a shot of some of their names. So Matt Groom, writer, Eduardo Figurato, artist, Marcelo Costa, colorist, color flats was Mariana Khalil, letterer Tori Petitri. I don't know if that's how you say that. And a whole bunch of other people. But the art was fantastic. The story was pretty good. I liked the layers of it. Parts of it I felt like were a little bit derivative or a little bit too on the nose. Here's some of the art that they show in the back to get an idea of what it looks like in the book, what kind of talent the artists have. I really loved this bit. There's just so much pretty artwork in here. Lots of purples and blues and pinks. And the color palette was just, it went from like this green to this blue and red, and it elevated through each of the stories. Now there are 6 chapters in this. I don't know if there's any more. I haven't found any more from this. So if this is the entire collection, I think it ended in a pretty interesting place. And if there is more, I would enjoy reading it. So what this is about is an NPC character being coded based on experiments by the coder, by the designer, by the creator, to eventually get artificial intelligence and to get an NPC that doesn't just go based on code. And in the first chapter, she keeps killing the playable character over and over again at the end, no matter what he does. And I found that really fun to start with. So my word for this is heroics, because he's supposed to be the hero, and he is an ass. He is violent, he's controlling, he does some terrible things throughout the 6 stories, and he's supposed to be the hero. And she's supposed to be nothing. She's a black female warrior. Besides being a computer character and AI, he does whatever he can to eliminate her because she's a threat to the corporation. So this ascendance and working through what it means to be alive and in what type of reality was really, really cool. I like that type of thing. And there's a lot of interesting conversations that could be had because of this. So if you're interested in this type of artificial reality, what does it mean to be human perspectives, and you love some really good art, you should really check this out. Book number 4 was Midnight Special by Seanan McGuire, and this was the sequel to Discount Armageddon. So it's Very or Verity Price, and she's got her band of cryptids who are, the paranormal monstery creatures or non-monstery creatures of the world versus human. Anything that's essentially not human and not animal is a cryptid. Anyways, she's in this romantic entanglement with somebody from the Covenant, and more people from the Covenant are coming to town to see if a purge is needed, aka New York City needs to be purged, and there's a dragon underneath New York City. So just to give you a little taste of what that's like, there's family relations and kidnappings and bombs and magical talisman and mind reading and all sorts of fun things, and lots of gore or references to gore. The characters were fantastic. They were consistent and unique, and I loved it, especially Istis. Oh my god, she's hilarious. So anyways, my word for this is mice, because part of the lore is we're having these Aslan mice that record and document her life via, like, it's a religious ceremony. All of the things that happen in her life are religious ceremony. She is the high priestess, and the Covenant boy changes names all the time. It's like, hail the cheese and cake, or I invoke food for privacy, and it's just, they're hilarious. But they're also not just mice, they're not just creatures that bother Verity, although they keep her awake quite often and bother her and get in the middle of things all the time. But they're employed as spies and can be dangerous and, kill rats and vermin and other things and snakes and whatnot that, endanger their livelihoods. So they're fierce little creatures, as well as the keepers of the lore, and they have pride and all that other stuff, and they're really interesting. Very interesting. So I gave this a 4.5. Oh, by the way, I gave Self-Made 4.5 as well, because some of the characters were a little cliche, but there's only so much you can do in that kind of scenario, So book number 6 is one that I rolled over from last month. It is Recipe for Persuasion by Sonali Dev. I still really enjoyed her writing this time. I didn't listen to it. I actually read her writing style, and I still really appreciated a lot of things that she wrote. My word for this was props, and not in like, hey, I'm giving you props, but more in the way that she used props throughout the story to keep storyline going, like the knife that almost fell and cut off Ash's toes, and that Rico saved her from, which was replayed and reused several times. The knife was meaningful because it was her father's, who's dead, etc. So using props throughout was really interesting. Now, one of the things, there was plenty of props and like present day discussion of, what is it called? It's not quite a prop, it is not quite foreshadowing, it's something between the two of them. An illusion? She alludes to a lot of things that are quite obvious, given the type of culture that the mother comes from. I really love the mother's perspective in this, as a third alternate from the love interest. I really did like that part. I didn't like were the flashback chapters of the mother, Shobi. Shobani. I think that it could have been dealt with in present and been a lot more fruitful of a conversation starter, rather than just dramatizing and having the internal struggle of the mother as a young woman who is being forced to marry, who loves somebody else, who eventually has marital rape happen, which is how Ash was conceived, and the choice of whether or not to keep the baby or not, and the fight for women's rights. Like, they're all very important discussions, and I don't want to take away from that at all, but I think it would have been dealt better had we not seen it happening in the flashback, but just had the reflection of it in the present in a more minimalized, having her reflect rather than having her dramatize, because I think the dramatization is too much. It's like showing something that's obvious that we didn't need to see, that we got the full scope of without needing to actually see it. And it just didn't add enough to have the reason. It didn't add enough to give it the space that it got. There we go. That's what I'm trying to get to. It was just too much. But without those parts, this would have been another 5-star. But because of those parts, I gave this 4 stars. So yeah, still really loved the retelling. I hope she keeps writing in this series. I think the brother deserves a story. I'm just saying. So my last book is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, and this was another one of my sci-fi. Oh, and the last one was a romance, obviously contemporary romance retelling. But this one, I have so many thoughts on this one, and they're all kind of contradictory of each other. So I had a lot of hopes for this book, and a lot of them were met. I'm not sure how I feel about it. The fact that President Snow is so old. He was, what, like 18 when the 10th Hunger Games went on? Do they have age elongating stuff in the Capitol? I really liked a lot of his background of like watching people cannibalize the dead because they were so starved during the war, missing his parents, not living up to his parents, of learning about his dad and how he's pretty much just like his dad. I really wanted to know more about his mom, though. His mom's connection to the current, like, administration who used to be friends with the father, because he made a comment about it, and I just would have liked a little bit more on that. I'm not sure how I feel about the Lucy Gray and him ending. I mean, I kind of expected it, I kind of hoped for it, and I kind of hoped for the other alternative as well. So I'm not really sure how happy I am, because I wanted both, and obviously I couldn't get both. But, alright, so my word for this is connections, and I gave this 4.5 stars because I really, really did enjoy it and made a lot of sense. It created a lot of connections to the original trilogy, and throughout the whole thing, the half that I read this month, or I listened to this month, I had the Hanging Tree song in my head the entire time I was listening to the second half of this book, and the connections of the Katniss flowers and Lucy Gray creating the song that Katniss sang, and just being from District 12, and all. There's just a lot of connections that set us up for Katniss being this big thing in the series, which of course she is. She's the main protagonist, but I just really liked the setup for that. Something I wish I had seen that I didn't get was there's a lot of allusions, and I don't remember if these are in the books or if they're just in the movies, to Snow poisoning people and having to drink some of that poison himself, which is why the blood, whenever he drinks something and he wears the roses, because it masks that smell. Like, there is that theory. It's out there, and I don't remember where it came from necessarily, but I do wish that that had been somewhere in the book. I know there are a few poisonings, but I kind of wanted to see, and I know it was probably like too much just in that one spec where he got started in the games and towards his career, and for his first experience with the Hunger Games and how it changed into this media phenomenon that he kind of helped create. I wanted to see even a flash forward of it instead of taking as long as we did in other bits of the book. I feel like we could have had a shorter his first experience with the Hunger Games, a shorter his experience afterwards, and then some of his upcoming as the politician, as he gained president, as he became a full adult immersed into what he becomes at the end. Even bits of him when Katniss is there. Like, I could see the full gamut of his life in this, and having it be a little bit longer, but having packed so much more drama and things happening rather than drawing out the slower parts of it. It was painful to listen to, read, and interact with the bits that were the host who was a weatherman, trying to like keep up this facade, which I'm sure is supposed to be painful because the way it advances and becomes so much more sophisticated later in the original series. I don't know. It was interesting. Anyways, again, I gave this 4.5, although I think it could have done a whole lot more. I understand what it did, and why it did what it did, and where it left us and what it showed us, and I appreciate a lot of those things. So I'm thinking like a 4.5 I'm bordering on now that I'm thinking about it and processing a little bit more on screen. Okay, anyways, so this means that I missed one on my rolls, and that was Trashy Conquest by Gemma James, and so I am going to invoke a one book rollover as to not punish myself. If I can finish this book next month, aka in March, as my additional 8th book, thankfully it's short, then I will not have to punish myself. But if I don't finish this one next month, or any of the other ones on my list next month, minus one that I may roll over, can't be the same one, I'm going to pull from my punishment jar. And with that in mind, I will show you up here where I'm at. I'm pretty sure it's still 16 weeks until I get Deborah Harkness's book. Shadow of Night, my punishment book. That's going to be a 24-hour listen. So whenever it pops up, I will stop what I'm doing and listen to it as my punishment. Okay guys, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for listening to me ramble about books. What did you read in February? I would love to know what you've been interested in, what you've loved, what you disliked. Warn me away from some books if you must. Anyways, thanks for watching guys. I'll see you next time. Bye!